welcome. You're watching Secure by Design by me, Richard Hagewald, and I'm glad that you found this video. I'm working as the lead architect within ATIA Sweden, and I'm very happy to share and introduce you to this channel and what we are aiming to talk about. I've been working the last 20 years of my professional life with assisting organizations getting on track with how to use what they have in their portfolio the best possible way to create a safe and yet productive user experience for their end users. I have a solid background in working across public and private sector organizations. I've been an IT consultant for 10 plus years, and today I work with business development within ATIA. This YouTube channel will be focusing on creating that sense of both urgency that we need to do something with our security posture, but also the urgency of making sure that when we do that, we make sure that our employees are on track. That the ones that are going to be utilizing the systems that we talk about are actually on track with what we try to sell them or impose on them, or if we do it right, give to them because they've asked for it. I run a blog called The Better Cloud, and I think you can see that that is the better cloud. It's a little fluffy pink cloud up there, and of course it's a word game. I believe that when we do IT in 2024 and onwards, we need to consider how we can make use of cloud technologies the best way possible. Because if we don't, I think that we will be outnumbered, we will be made oblivious. Not because we can't deliver IT from on-premise data centers, not because we can use hybrid resources, but I just truly believe that it is highly challenging in delivering the same capacity, the same breadth, and the same precision with solutions that we build on hardware that we are to maintain, and not even then to talk about cost. Because to bring about the same efficiency about how we use hardware in an environmentally responsible way, using the best possible combination of various hardware components to deliver that very business outcome, that is not to be taken lightly. So, but what are we going to talk about? Well, one of the core building blocks that I will be integrating into, at least having an ambition of integrating it into every episode, is Microsoft security components. I will be talking quite substantially about Microsoft Defender's XDR stack, how we can use Entra ID for securing our sign-ins of both users, devices and applications, how we can add some AI on top of that with Copilot for security, and of course making sure that we use Copilot for Microsoft 365 to bring about that truly brilliant user experience. When we talk about Microsoft security, I would say we could divide that into 4 or 5 distinct pillars. One of them is what we traditionally see when I talk with customers, when I've been talking with peers over the years, and that is the traditional endpoint protection. Back in the days, it was labeled antivirus. Over the different iterations that came about, we had functionality such as EDR added on top of that core antivirus system and service that ran on the operating system. And with EDR, we all of a sudden did not only have the capability of seeing and mapping files, services towards what was happening on certain files, that we could also monitor and see what was happening on processes. How was processes supposed to be behaving on that endpoint, and map that towards known patterns of malicious code, of malicious behaviors coming from malicious actors. EDR and antivirus joined together is somewhere where I believe that we find most organizations today during the fall of 2024. I'm not saying all organizations are there, but quite a few have seen that we need to have an EDR solution on our client endpoints equally much as on our server endpoints. And if we do, we will get a decent protection. The problem here is that the adversaries have also made sure to find ways to circumvent EDR detections, to get on the go with seeing how can we inject malicious code, how can we get hold of identities, how can we get hold of everything. And that brings us to the next foundational building block that I want to talk about in the Defender XDR stack, and that is protecting the identities. From a Microsoft perspective, my personal understanding is that we look at on-premise identities and cloud-based identities in two different, I wouldn't say silos, but in two different approaches. Cloud-based identities are the ones that tie into Entra ID, the Microsoft Identity and Access Platform, formerly known as Azure AD. Most, or at least many, that I spoke with often confused Azure AD with traditional AD, and the feature set that we could see in Entra ID was similar to what we found on-prem, but it also had so much more. So I think that is one of the reasons to why we saw a name change a few years ago. So what do we do with Entra ID then? Well, Microsoft, as at least to my knowledge, one of the very strong competitors that we have in security, has got quite a separate position on the market with regards to signals. Signals about what logons are happening in their corporate space with Entra ID, in their private space with Bing, Xbox, Hotmail, Outlook. Well, Microsoft has been around on the private market for quite some time as well. All those signals are being baked into a baseline, a good way of knowing what does a good logon look like, what does a bad or a risky logon look like. While machines of course can be wrong and baselines are there to be challenged, when we talk about Entra ID, I think it's a matter of seeing how can we use the best possible way of working with that. How can we create the best possible way of essentially building or bringing the best value to our end users. Now, when we talk about identity and protection in the identity space, I think cloud-based identities is not just about how we protect our end users and how we protect our logons to our corporate environment. It's also about how we make sure that we can protect the devices into which those users sign in. And the devices, they have an identity. The identity is being registered to an Entra ID device, being potentially managed by Intune or something. And what we want to accomplish here is that we want to make sure that we don't just have an identity, but we also have something with regards to posture. I'm coming to what we refer to with posture in a little while. So we've got user identities, we've got device identities, and third of all, which is something that we're coming up a little bit some time ago, that is application identities. We use Entra ID for making sure that we have connectivity. Many of our organizations that have come in contact with Entra ID do that because they've transitioned to utilizing Microsoft 365 as their productivity platform. But Entra ID also brings about the ability to sign in to other applications. If we look at Entra ID as a phenomenon and we want to use it to sign in to, I don't know, LinkedIn or potentially Dropbox, we could. And that's a matter of how we can use one centralized cloud-based identity platform to safeguard those logons. In Entra, it's all about Entra ID protection and how we can map the baselines of each and every user to secure those logins. On premise, that's a whole different question. We use the same signal sets that we use in Entra. We use the same kind of correlational intelligence, and then once we are done, we can apply that to signals that we gather from on-premise as well. With Defender for Identity, we can catch signals from Active Directory domain controllers, Active Directory Federation Services servers, Active Directory Certificate Services, and now lately Active Directory or Entra ID Connect service. These are all contact points where the identity as such in the on-premise layer do some kind of authentication, authorization, or at least connection attempt. By bringing all the signals of the cloud-based identity and the on-premise identity into one funnel and then correlating all that in the Entra ID space, it all brings about a quite decent way of protecting our identities. Well, I mentioned third portion or a third type of identity, which is application identities. When we sign in to utilize Microsoft 365, Dropbox or whatnot, then the identity of the application itself needs to get access to your Entra ID. The effects of that is that the permissions that we grant the application are granted indefinitely, unless we do something to change it. What we've seen lately is that there's attacks coming up where attackers, they pose as some well-known brand, they set up a cloud application, they get the user to grant that application permissions because the user thought that this was something that was very beneficial for him or her. And all of a sudden, the adversary has got full control, or at least the permissions that the user granted, to get information about your organization. This is a whole new type of threat, but being in the hybrid war era that we are, we definitely do see that this is a real and true challenge. So we spoke about protecting the endpoints. We spoke about how we can protect or what tools we use to protecting identities. I would like to move on and say we need to protect cloud apps. And that's not just protecting the identities of the cloud apps. In the ecosystem, we've got a component called Defender for Cloud Apps. Pretty suitable name if you ask me. That component is about how we can make sure that the cloud apps that our end users are actually connecting to are not only being utilized in a safe way, but they're also being provided to us with standards that we comply to. The definite way of looking into this is the Defender for Cloud App Catalog, where we can get a risk scoring procured by the Microsoft professionals, saying whether a cloud app fulfills certain regulations, certifications, and thereby also assisting us as an organization in how we can become compliant. Because I believe, and this is taking me back to the notion of digital employee experience, that being free to choose and use whatever you need and want to use in your everyday workday isn't just beneficial. When we listen to various research institutes, a question that often comes up is the large abundance of various applications. In a recent study from my Danish colleagues, we listened in and heard that up to 25 applications on a regular business day is needed, not just available, but needed to get the job done. When you think about it, it is kind of mind-boggling that an end user need not just to be aware of, but also need to some extent master all those applications in order to do what they're tasked to do. It's no wonder that we see an increase in stress levels, that we see an increase in burnout symptoms, and because of that, well, there might need or lie a challenge in simplifications, in not just opening up to any application, to working with any kind of workload that the user so pleases. I will be reasoning more around the various approaches that we can have using DEX as a strategic way of thinking. So I've been going over a little bit of various security technologies, and I just want to give you a hint into what we are going to be presenting. My goal is to keep those episodes to around 20 minutes each. And each of the episodes that are coming up are going to be quite focused. We're going to be focusing on what is happening within each space. How can we use various components within each of the different products to make sure that we get the best value out of them in every single point of time? My ambition is that you will find what I'm talking about interesting. Please do send me a DM, comment in the comments field of this video if you find anything to be hard to understand. If you want me to elaborate, if you want me to talk about some new topics, then please do let me know. The next session of the SecureByDesign is going to be about how do we work, and so more like why do we work? Why would I be choosing Microsoft security on top of other vendors? What is the reason for why we are seeing Microsoft security to be a suitable way of moving forward if we are standardized on Microsoft 365? How can Microsoft security be one of the top choices if we want to integrate and work with continuous service delivery improvements? Until next time, please have a good one, and we'll keep in touch.